One of the most prolific artists of the 1980s and 1990s was the American painter Bob Ross. In addition to teaching art enthusiasts how to paint a certain style, he also taught his followers how to be compassionate and kind. His voice and consoling words still soothe people today, and he taught them how to remain quiet. Despite everything, this well-known man's life has a sinister side. Before he passed away at the age of 52, Bob Ross finally expressed what we all believed. On October 29, 1942, Jack and Ollie Ross welcomed Robert "Bob" Norman Ross into the world at Daytona Beach, Florida. This was before to his rise to fame. His mother was a waitress, while his father was a builder. They were rather typical individuals. Ross was inherently kind, even as a small child, and he treated animals with that consideration. When he was younger, he frequently took in injured mice, armadillos, snakes, and even alligators, tending to them until they recovered. As he grew older, some of these animals even appeared during the filming of his show. Ross also had a half-brother named Jim, in case any of you were unaware. However, he only mentioned Jim once and never elaborated on him. Ross spent some time working as a carpenter with his father when he dropped out of school. He lost a tiny fragment of his left index finger as a result of this injury. Ross was fortunate that this did not interfere with his day-to-day activities. In his later years of employment, he was able to perform everyday tasks, such as accurately holding a box. When Ross turned 18, he accepted the call to service. He became a member of the U.S. Air Force. Before rising through the ranks and becoming the first sergeant of the Alaskan Eisen Air Force Base Clinic, he was employed there as a medical records assistant. Even now, this region is renowned for its breathtaking landscapes that demonstrate the pristine state of nature. Ross painted snow and mountains repeatedly, but this was his first time viewing them. However, Bob Ross had an injury before to all of this that permanently altered the trajectory of his life. He first saw Bill Alexander's television program, The Magic of Oil Painting, while working as a part-time bartender. Through Alexander's presentation, Ross became aware of alla prima. Wet on wet is comparable to the 1600s drawing style known as alla prima. The painter can work on the board more quickly, and complete it more quickly as long as the paint isn't totally dry before applying a new layer. Ross wanted to attempt it himself when Alexander demonstrated that he could complete the picture in 30 minutes. Everyone should be aware at this point that Ross was worn out from his job and raising his son Steve alone. As a result, painting became both a burning urge and a secure sanctuary for him. Many years later, Ross claimed that he nearly lost his temper when he saw Alexander complete the picture so fast. The elder man could complete the task that took him days in a flash. Ross was fortunate to learn that Alexander was hosting a teacher training about an hour from his place of employment. He saw this as an opportunity to get additional painting skills and work as Alexander's helper. When the lesson ended, Ross was someone else. His passion for painting became an obsession. The bad news was that he was assigned to Eisen Air Force Base in Fairbanks, Alaska. When the would-be great painter became proficient in the wet-on-wet technique, it was not surprising since he had studied it so thoroughly. He painted Alaskan sceneries on gold mine pans using this technique. It continued to sell and was a huge hit. His earnings from selling drawings eventually surpassed his earnings from his employment. At the age of 39, Ross, who had attained the rank of Master Sergeant, eventually left the Army. As previously said, Bob Ross was well known for his calming voice, which is ironic considering that throughout his military career, he had to be cruel and brutal in order to train his men. Ross began drawing during his daily breaks at work because he found solace in it, despite the fact that it was difficult for everyone. After leaving the service, Ross vowed to himself that he would never again be a tough guy. Ross's passion for drawing blossomed after enrolling in an art class at the USO Club in Anchorage. He was shocked to discover that he disagreed with his painting instructors, who had a stronger preference for abstract art. It's no secret that Ross enjoyed sketching landscapes, and they played a significant role in his later work. Thus, he continued using Alexander's approach and improved his skills. Now that Alexander had retired, Ross returned to Florida to view more of his work. He became a traveling salesperson and instructor after swiftly moving up the ranks of Alexander's Magic Art Supplies company. For a while, everything went really smoothly, especially since Alexander wanted to hire more art instructors to assist him teach and market his fantastic art supplies. It also included some special equipment, such as the palette knife that Bill Alexander invented, his renowned large brushes, and Magic White, a base color that he uses in all of his paintings. Ross moved to Salem, Oregon, to work as a salesman for Alexander, leaving his child with his second wife. For a year, his wife consented to let him work on this project. He would return home if it didn't work out. Ross became acquainted with his clients while working there, and Annette Kowalski was a key contributor to his current level of fame. Walt and Annette Kowalski were devastated by the death of their 25-year-old son in a vehicle accident. For days on end, Walt was committed to his wife, while Annette was dead and unsure of what to do. As luck would have it, when she found out about Bill Alexander, she started to feel something again. He showed her that life has more to offer, and that there are many wonderful things in the world. Walt called Alexander's company to inquire about any closed workshops after noticing this positive shift. To enable and to attend one of Bob Ross's workshops in Clearwater, Florida, they traveled a great distance from one that was 1,000 miles away. Ross's military duty was no longer visible on his face. He wore his hair in a bob and had the easygoing demeanor of a hippie who enjoyed painting. Bob Ross had always admired the elder man and considered him a hero before they got into a fight. His second how-to book about Bill even included the following dedication. In a time when it's said there are no heroes, I feel most fortunate to have been inspired and influenced by a giant in the field of art, Bill Alexander. He has been my mentor and friend, and has been so instrumental in everything I have accomplished. However, like with many positive things, their friendship, which started because they both enjoyed painting and the outdoors, was altered when Bob Ross Incorporated was established. The idea for Ross's own business began when the Kowalskis asked Ross if he would be willing to give a few courses in Washington, D.C. Ross accepted the position since it would increase his income, of course. The Kowalskis even made the decision to compensate him for his labor and provide him with lodging by allowing him to use their spare room. Naturally, everything was paid for by the couple, even the tools and art supplies. Bob immediately won Annette over, and she informed him he could launch his own company during one of their lessons. She and her husband Walt even provided financial support to Ross and his wife so that he could launch his own company. Despite having talented employees and connections, Bob Ross Incorporated struggled in its early years. Additionally, you should be aware that the two painters' friendship has not yet deteriorated. Alexander was so generous that he even gave Ross greater authority. The older painter assisted Ross by allowing him to film with him for a time. As a result, Ross and Alexander frequently shared the screen. Alexander is seen passing the brush in one of their promotional videos. They made a joke about him being almighty, too. An almighty man. Things went south between Ross and Annette Kowalski while they were teaching a class in Indiana and were called by the local PBS station, WPB. Ross seized the opportunity. Ross's performance, The Joy of Painting, was more well-liked and diverted attention from Alexander's top show at the station. The show quickly gained popularity among the majority of people. It was made possible by his grounded demeanor and improved appearance in front of the camera. It was soon broadcast on other stations, and Ross rose to prominence on television. Despite the sadness, this is what led to the altercation between the two artists. A show that inspires people and provides them ideas was born out of some really difficult circumstances. Wait until you hear what happened to Bob Ross Incorporated if you don't think this is depressing. Bill Alexander claimed to have invented the wet-on-wet approach, but Ross believed he could do it more effectively. In 1991, Alexander informed the New York Times that Ross had deceived him. Because 60 PBS stations agreed to carry the show, and Ross was already taping his art class at a station in Falls Church, Virginia. In 1982, Bob Ross Incorporated fared quite well. He received compensation from the art supplies, videotapes, and how-to books, and completed all of his paintings for free. Under his own name, Bob Ross has produced a great deal of art. The Joy of Painting's inaugural season ran from January 1983 to May 1994. Nonetheless, it continues to be aired on Create, and even on the streaming service Hulu. From a tiny company, Bob Ross Incorporated expanded to a $1.15 million, which comprised seminars conducted by Ross certified instructors in his style. Over the course of his career, Ross is said to have painted 30,000 paintings. Nevertheless, the Kowalskis own Bob Ross Incorporated, which owns the majority of his works, making them difficult to locate. Bob Ross was so secretive that his sudden death from cancer complications on July 4, 1995, came as a shock to everyone. He has previously prepared 7 paintings for the 32nd season of The Joy of Painting. He was only 52. Today, Bob Ross's name is frequently associated with joy, and his image and figure will always be associated with art and the outdoors. His image has influenced TV series, films, characters, and other aspects of popular culture. The renowned streaming service Twitch aired consecutive episodes of The Joy of Painting for 9 days in October 2015 to celebrate the painter's 73rd birthday. The event was so successful that Twitch decided to restream it every Monday. A portion of the proceeds from the stream will be donated to various charities. Beauty is Everywhere, one of Bob Ross's shows, was introduced to Netflix's streaming service the following year. The painter made new acquaintances as a result, and his life and work attracted new admirers. Observing this advancement, the Kowalskis followed suit. They ran their business successfully. They created a Bob Ross-only YouTube channel, which amassed 1 million members in under a year. In any case, they have complete control over Ross's image, thus it is nearly difficult for them to pass up this opportunity. After Ross and his wife passed away, the Kowalskis were the only proprietors of the company. According to the company's regulations, the remaining partners would split the stock equally in the event of a partner's death. The Kowalskis had always been business-minded, therefore it was fortunate for them that they lived longer than Ross and his second wife. As time passed, they reportedly engaged in violent altercations with Ross's relatives in an attempt to obtain his rights before he passed away. Ross prioritized his family and disliked conflict. Instead, he left the Kowalskis out of his will and bequeathed his name, portrait, and everything he possessed to his sons, Steve and Jim, his half-brother. The Kowalskis refused to give up as the peaceful demonstration turned into a bloody battle for their rights. Everything Bob Ross performed for the corporation, they claimed, was paid labor. The Kowalskis ultimately prevailed in the litigation, and they were given the favorable ruling. Fortunately, things quickly improved for the Ross family that remained together after one catastrophe after another. Joan Kowalski, the daughter of Ed and Joan Kowalski, took over the company after their retirement and made several adjustments. She became more transparent about the business and even taught others how to sell the things outside of their primary business, in contrast to her nasty parents. She also oversaw an agreement that allowed Steve Ross and Bob Ross's half-brother Jimmy Cox to utilize the Ross name and image without facing legal repercussions. Additionally, this transfer allowed Steve Ross to return to painting and his art business. For fear of getting sued, he had to quit doing that earlier. Bob Ross is one of the few well-known individuals who has kept the majority of their life a mystery despite their fame. For the record, we are aware that he has 2 children and has been married 3 times. He had his first child with a woman he dated in his youth. His first wife, Vivian Ridge, gave birth to a son. Robert Stephen Ross, his son, followed in his father's footsteps and became a painter. Although Ross and Ridge's marriage ended in divorce, Ross and his kid had a closer relationship than before. Steve Ross became a Ross certified teacher and continued his father's profession. He even appeared in a couple episodes of The Joy of Painting. Young Steve read aloud the viewers' how-to queries to Ross during the final episode of the first season of The Joy of Painting. Naturally, the older Ross took his time and gave them the best response he could while simultaneously finishing the painting. In the same year that Ross and Ridge broke up, Ross got married a second time. Jane was the woman he married for the second time. Together, they didn't have any kids. Their marriage would have lasted longer if she hadn't passed away from cancer in 1995. The third and final wife of Ross was Linda Brown. In 1995, 2 months before he passed away, they were married. Bob Ross, the happy painter, demonstrates how little is known about his private life. Only a handful of the talks provide us with a glimpse of his personality. However, as it is a part of Bob Ross Incorporated, practically everything is kept under wraps. His intellectual property and privacy are safeguarded in this way. Many people are also curious about Bob Ross's religion, but he was so private that we may never know it completely. We do know, however, that he explicitly declared his belief in a creator God who created everything in our environment. He concluded his performance by wishing his audience, "God bless." Ross continued to help animals by taking in injured ones. Ross's paintings in The Joy of Painting even had brief appearances by a few of them. In order to allow people to view Bob Ross's paintings and learn from him from the comfort of their own homes, the BBC re-aired previous episodes of The Joy of Painting when COVID-19 struck.